Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
All right, guys, welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast. I've got a very special guest of mine, one that I'm really excited to talk with, one that kind of I don't want to use the wrong verbiage and offend you, but one that kind of just runs the elk hunting world. We have Mr. Corey Jacobson. Corey, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for inviting me to be on.
Now, if you don't know who Corey is, you've kind of just been living underneath a rock. But Corey, give us a quick introduction to yourself, man.
Yeah, no, I'm just a regular guy who is irregularly passionate about elk hunting. So, I grew up in elk country, and I think really what opened the door for me was my involvement in the World Elk Calling Championships. And I've been fortunate to win that 10 times, and through that it's just led down a rabbit hole of everything elk hunting, and created a website, elk101.com, that basically is kind of a hub for everything educational and entertainment related to elk and elk hunting.
Which is why I love guys that are informational. I love guys that help make other people better. There's a lot of guys out there, and they're cool to watch, and they do really cool stuff. But your Corey Jacobsons and your John Dudleys, those guys are awesome because you put out the information there to help. And might I add, I told him I would add it. Chuck Adams just released his first website. He's kind of never been in that space before, but Chuck Adams Archery is going to be a very informational type website, which I'm incredibly excited about, because again, I just love guys who put out information for us to learn, that I can watch and grow from. I could literally start naming names and go all day, but Rocky Mountain Specialty Gear, to help me with informational stuff on shooting a recurve, and Aaron Schneider on shooting a recurve. These guys who put out informational stuff, it's just vital. And so, Corey, from the bottom of my heart, man, I appreciate what you do, because as somebody who is eager to learn more about elk hunting, Elk 101 is a place that I find myself going to often. So I appreciate what you do, and continue to do it, man.
Absolutely. No, and it really does. It combines two of my greatest passions, which obviously elk and elk hunting is one of them, but I love to see other people be successful. And, in today's world, I think we get a lot of, I think it comes from jealousy or something, but we feel that if somebody else is successful, it takes away from our success, or it takes the window of limelight away from us. And I just feel like, man, especially when it comes to hunting, if somebody else is successful, it does nothing to diminish my success or my efforts. And it's just cool to be a very small part of helping someone else achieve success or increase success or become more confident or more consistent. And so when you combine the two, it's really just a pleasure and an honor to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah. And I remember one time I was probably in high school, and there was talk of this monster deer at my grandparents' place, and we hunted this deer so hard. And I remember somebody at school, it was actually a staff member at school, came by and said, "Hey, I saw that deer that runs your grandparents' place." And I was like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And he said, "He's been coming on my place." And I went home and I told my dad, I'm like, "Dude, if he shoots that deer, I'm going to be so mad." And he said, "Well, if you're going to be mad if he shoots that deer, then you're not a sportsman and you don't need to be hunting." And I was like, and I was like, "What? Like, what do you mean, Dad? We've hunted this deer for years, for 3-4 years now." And he said, "Right, but a hunter's success is a hunter's success, and we need to share in that success with them." And I didn't understand that, until I started being in a place where I got to really teach and show and help other people learn. And now thinking back on that, now I really understand what my dad meant. And it was a valuable lesson at a young age.
Absolutely. And I feel the same way when it comes to elk hunting. I grew up hunting by myself or just, high school, college. You aren't serious necessarily about your hunting partners. You just want somebody to go with. And so, I'd either hunt alone or with somebody that I didn't necessarily know that well or hadn't hunted with a lot. And you always ended up competing with them. You both wanted to be the one that set up and shot. Nobody wanted to be the one that called and, didn't get to put their tag on an elk. And then as I got a little older, had a couple really incredible hunting partners that, showed me what it was like to be on a team. And I've always been on teams in athletics, but when it comes to hunting, the real competition is between you and the mountain or you and the elk. And it's not between you and another hunter or you and your hunting partner, especially. There's always going to be somebody that shoots a bigger animal than you every single year. When it comes to your hunting partner, if you learn to work as a team and you're as excited or more excited when they're successful as you are when you're successful, not only does it increase the enjoyment of it, but it truly increases your ability to be successful. And just so important, I think, to learn that and to implement it and truly believe it to enjoy and to achieve that success at the highest level.
I wish I could remember who it was that was telling me. And but they were saying, way back in the day, it was really hard to draw this tag, and so we might be 7 or 8 of us all out hunting, but only one guy had the tag. And but if that person tagged out, it was like we all did. And that's really truly what it is all about. The camaraderie, the building memories, the having relationships. And a lot of times you can learn more from being on a hunt with somebody and not being the one pulling the trigger than you can being the one pulling the trigger, because you get to sit back and watch how they do things, how they make mistakes, especially if they're a more seasoned hunter than you. You get to sit back and watch when they draw, how they draw. You get to sit back and watch the movements they make. If you're on a deer hunt, you get to hear, how they cold call or how they rattle and or how they call an elk and how they set up for an elk to come in. And so, a lot of times those are the times you really, really learn, because you're not focused on harvesting the animal, but you get to just sit back and watch and learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, that's some of the greatest lessons I learned in elk hunting were actually after we filled our tags back in like the late 90s. We'd go to Yellowstone and just take a video camera and go and observe elk rutting. And, this is an area where they aren't hunted. They aren't afraid of people. They'll do their thing right there in front of a crowd. And we were able to go and see how they interact, how they respond. When one bull bugles and the other bulls, what do? What causes them to lift their head and to get excited to go to that other bull? The cows, how they interact, and just seeing all of that without, like you said, the pressure of doing anything. We were just there to observe, and it didn't matter if we, called an elk in, if we shot an elk, because we weren't doing any of that. We were just there learning from it. And I truly learned so many tactics and strategies that I've been able to apply to hunting just from observing.
Yeah, we used to do that with ducks. I got to the point where I was a young kid trying to learn how to duck call. You watch all these YouTube videos and you see how they blow the call and so on and so forth. But then you're like, I could also just go sit at the lake and hear ducks and then mimic that. So why would I want to learn from a dude on YouTube when I can just go learn from ducks? And so that's what I would do. I'd go sit at the park and listen to ducks, how they were when they were feeding, how they were when there were other ducks flying over, what were the ducks on the pond doing, so you're right, man. Now, before we move on, you have a huge giveaway going on, correct?
We do. Yeah. In fact, we've got multiple giveaways and different promotions coming up, but we just launched one, I think yesterday, the end of May here. So yeah, we're giving away an elk hunt, and it's a guided elk hunt in Colorado. And we've teamed up with Mountain Ops to give that hunt away.
Now, I put out a Facebook, I put out an Instagram story today saying recording with Corey Jacobsen. If you got any questions, let me know and I'll ask him. And 4 different people said the only question I've got is how can I go on a hunt with him? And so there's your answer, folks. There's your answer. Now, how can you enter to win that? Do you got to buy from Mountain Ops? Do you got to enter a form? What do you got to do?
So there's multiple ways. There's a form on the Mountain Ops website that you can just fill out and get a free entry. Every order that's placed on Mountain Ops's website between now and I think it runs through the end of June or close to the end of June. Every order gets you another entry. And then the big promotion is the bugleberry flavor that we teamed up with Mountain Ops and created a couple years ago. It's their most popular flavor. It sells out almost immediately every time they launch it. It's usually only in stock during like this promotion and then again in September. But if you purchase bugleberry, I believe it's another 10. I'm sitting here spouting off all this stuff and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's 10 more entries for any bugleberry purchase. It's actually 20 entries. I just jumped out on the website here. So 20 entries. And then if you sign up for the University of Elk Hunting online course, which is an online course that we created at Elk 101 to walk you through pretty much every aspect of elk hunting the end goal is to help you become more successful as an elk hunter. If you sign up for that course, you get another 20 entries. So buying bugleberry, signing up for the online course gets you a whole bunch of extra entries.
There you go. You want to go on elk hunt with Corey Jacobsen? That's how you do it. Now, while we're on the topic of Mountain Ops, I don't talk a lot of fitness and diet on my podcast, just because I don't want to be one of those guys. But I did have the question sent in to me. How do you work out regimen and diet wise? How do you stay in shape for the mountain?
Yeah, and that's, especially for elk hunting, it is so vital, I think, to enjoying the hunt, especially because elk live in rough country. They just, there's very few places where you're going to go and hunt them where you aren't going to be physically tested. They're a very dynamic animal. They move a lot. And so it really is a physically demanding hunt. And I'm fortunate I live in elk country. We have elk in our yard, during the winter. Very close by, we have elk in the fall that we're able to hunt. And so with that, I'm able to be out there in the spring shed hunting. And we do a lot of backcountry shed hunting trips where we're going back in 8 or 10 miles and setting up camp for 2 or 3 days on our back and then hiking this incredibly rough country and then packing the sheds out. So, that's one way, but I've gotten so where I really try to incorporate fitness into my lifestyle. And it definitely is an advantage when it comes to elk hunting, but I really think that just the lifestyle that it provides, the health, and just you feel better, the joint pains. At my age, I'm going to be 46 this year, and so you start recognizing, hey, I'm not as young as I once was, and there's pains here that didn't used to be here. So I really just try. I don't hit it hard. I don't try to bulk up. We do have a little home gym in our garage that I'm active on. But it's more of just going through a lot of full body movements and lifts, not necessarily trying to bulk up, but just to keep those muscles engaged and keep everything working together rather than isolating, biceps that look really good in the mirror at the gym, but don't really translate to a lot in real life, or especially in elk hunting. Working more on core and back and shoulders and legs and cardio. So, I really try to stay active in the outdoors and not spend as much time in the gym, but then also recognizing the value of hitting the gym and hitting some of the muscles that maybe you don't get to hit as actively when you're out hiking or doing different things.
You do anything specific, like diet wise?
Not as specific. We just, my wife is really good about making sure we eat healthy. I have a really, I was going to say a really sweet tooth. I have a tooth that really likes sweets. And, I have to be real careful there. And I've actually just started I've known for a long time that sugar causes inflammation and all sorts of stuff. And so I've really made a more conscious effort lately to cut way back on some of that. But yeah, naturally we just eat. I would say it's probably more of a a paleo type of a diet. Just, our freezer's full of wild game, and we've got a big garden, and so we try to eat a lot of what we harvest and grow ourselves.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I asked Aaron Snyder the same question, and he said, well, I work out a lot. I like to be active and fit, but I also really like cookies. So, I just found a nice balance. And I'm like, well, that's the perfect answer. But no, I was just curious, man. A lot of people, like I said, I had that question sent in to me, and reason being is because you look at guys and I went on a hunt. My first kind of backcountry style hunt was with a guy, and I'm not going to say his name and call him out because I don't want him to be embarrassed, but quite a bit older than me. Not 60, not 70 years old, but quite a bit older than me, and just ran up the mountain. And I'm talking running laps around me. And I was a chunky little kid from the Midwest, here in Kansas. If you want to go hiking, you just walk around a cornfield. And so I had never experienced this before. And having a 40-pound pack on going in, however many miles we went in, and he was running up the mountain and I was sucking wind. And I thought to myself, I was probably only, I don't remember how old I was, but I was a young enough guy to where that mountain shouldn't have been an issue. And when I got home from that hunt, I told myself that'll never happen again. That won't be the issue again. My physical abilities won't stop me from pursuing game the way I should anymore. I grew up an athlete, and so for me, it was almost like that. Okay, dude, you went to college, you gained 40 pounds at college. Now you got to get back in shape to hunt. And so that's why I asked, because you look at guys and you just think that's how I need to be. I need to be more active, more fit. I need to be better prepared for the mountain, because I don't ever want to look back and think, Lord, if I just would have been in a little bit better shape, I could have got to that ridge before that elk, or whatever it may be. I don't ever want physical limitations to be what keeps me from harvesting game.
Yeah, and especially in elk hunting. I've sat on a ridge and had an elk answer us from the canyon down below. And when we talk canyons, I mean, we're looking sometimes at 3,000 vertical feet down on really steep terrain. And if you shoot one down there, you've got to pack it back out. And I've stood on the edge of a canyon before and had a bull just screaming down below. And the person I was hunting with said, there's no way I'm dropping down there. And, an elk that is very vocal and screaming is pretty much saying, hey, I'm ready to be hunted and killed today. And to turn and walk away from something like that is, that's an opportunity sometimes you only get once a season. And you don't ever want your physical conditioning to be that limiting factor, because it's one of the few things that you actually have control of when it comes to elk hunting.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I grew up a little different. I grew up in southern Arkansas, or I grew up hunting in southern Arkansas, I should say. And I grew up hunting with a bunch of fat old rednecks. And they would sit around and I mean eat like kings and just gorge themselves, then go sit out in tower blinds. And so growing up, that was my mentality of hunting. Was just, I don't want to say lazy, but lazy. That was my mentality of hunting. And then growing up and starting to explore more and go more places and even hog hunts. I'm going on a hog hunt here in 2 weeks, and in that one day I'll put in 6 miles chasing hogs pretty easily. And so just that kind of thing, I'm like, man, I don't want my day hunting to be miserable, because I enjoy cookies. I don't want my day to be miserable because I'm lazy all day at home. And so, I really when I grew up, that was the mindset I had, was just good old boys sitting around a fire. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's just not the kind of hunting I want to do. And that's not the kind of hunter I want to be. Because I got news for you. Even some of my leases here in Kansas, you got to walk in a mile. Well, if you're carrying a bow and camera gear and, maybe a pop-up blind and a decoy, by the time you get there, you're ready to go home. You're miserable. And so that's just not the kind of hunter I wanted to be. And so that's the only reason I asked, man, because I look at guys like you and Brian Call, and I'm like, man, their physical limitations don't play as much of a role as they do for me. And so I need to step it up. And because I'm still only 28 years old, and I'm like, I can't let this get too far away from me. And so, yeah, that's why I asked. Now I have gotten away from myself, and I haven't even given an ad yet. You guys got to go check out my friends Easton. I have been shooting now the Easton Axis long range out of my recurve. I'm running an Ethics outsert system on the front. I've got 260 out front, and these things are flying like absolute darts. I've fallen in love with this arrow. And the reason I was inspired to shoot this arrow, not only Fred Eichler shoots it, and he's the man, but also I was just told that arrow would tune really well to a recurve with heavy weight out front. And so I checked out the Easton Axis long range, and it's flying incredible out of my recurve. So head over and check out the Easton Axis long range. You can head over and check it out at our friends Sportsman's Warehouse. They carry that arrow. So head over to a Sportsman's Warehouse and check out the Easton Axis long range because it's a phenomenal arrow. Now, run me through tips and tricks on boots. What are you looking in a boot? What kind of stiffness do you like? What kind of insulation do you like? What are you looking for in a good pair of and we'll just go general all around boots. Because I know, most guys have different boots for different things. But if you're looking for one pair of boots, a do-all boot, this question was sent in to us, and they just want to know what you look for in a pair of all-around boots.
Yeah, no, and boots are probably the hardest thing to recommend because everybody's foot is shaped differently. And I have the hardest time finding a pair of boots that'll fit my foot. There's a lot of quality boots out there. There's a lot of quality brands, but it's important to find one that fits your foot first and foremost, because it doesn't matter if it's insulated, it doesn't matter how much stiffness and support it has, doesn't matter how comfortable the insole is, if it doesn't fit to your foot. And if, I have a kind of skinnier heels and skinny ankles and then a little bigger calf, and so my heel slides quite a bit. So finding one that locks my heel in is important. I also have a little bit of a wider foot, and so some boots are a little narrower, so I put my feet in a narrow boot and clamp it down, and my feet go to sleep immediately. And so it is important to find the one that fits you. With that being said, when you're elk hunting, you're on steep ground. You're very rarely walking on flat ground, so support is important. But at the same time, I don't want a boot that's going to be like a ski boot that I can't maneuver or be flexible in. So it's a kind of a balance there to make sure that when I'm packing a heavy load, I'm going to have good support for my ankles, but at the same time, I'm going to be able to be quick and nimble as I'm chasing elk up and down the mountain. Lightweight is important, but sometimes it's hard to get a good quality boot that incorporates a good amount of support while still being ultralight. So you have to recognize, hey, I've got to sacrifice a little bit of weight to get a good boot. Waterproof is hands down, no question, can't be compromised on that. It's got to be waterproof. And so those are kind of the things I look at. Number one, does it fit me? Number two, is it going to support heavy loads? Number three, is it going to be lightweight enough that I can hike 15 or 16 miles in rugged terrain in it? And, obviously I'm going to be tired, but if a boot weighs 1 pound versus 1 pound and 12 ounces, there's going to be a difference. And then when it comes to insulation, I don't hunt in an insulated boot unless I get into like November, December type hunts where there's going to be snow every day and cold temperatures, below zero, pretty much maintained throughout the day. If it's getting above freezing and there's just spotty snow or a chance of snow on a day or two, I don't hunt in an insulated boot.
Now, that being said, what boot do you run?
So I run the Zamberlan Viaz It's a 996, and I've actually, it's been the boot I've ran for probably 10 years now. And it was just one of the boots that I put on, and I have literally tried just about every brand of hunting boot, and not taking anything away from almost any of them, because they're all quality boots. But when I put that boot on, it felt like a glove on my foot, and hardly any break-in period for me. And I put hundreds and hundreds of miles on them a year, and I don't think I've ever gotten a blister from them.
Now, I had heard of Zomberlin, and I had never seen them, never felt them, never I just never had. And last time I was at Sportsman's Warehouse, they had some, and I was like, well, I got to try them on. I've heard good things about them. I've seen good things about them. So I put them on, laced them up. They were incredibly comfortable. They really were. I was impressed by them. I personally, I'm a huge fan of Schnee's. They fit my feet really well. I really did. I loved the Outlook Evo, and went to order a new pair of them, and they said, hey, man, they've been discontinued. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, you guys are worthless. No, I'm just kidding. So I went into the Kestrels, and both of those boots, if you look them up, really lightweight, really low on the stiffness scale. They're not super stiff, and I just don't like a super stiff boot. So both of those are really lightweight. Both of those are uninsulated. Both of those are really not a stiff boot. And reason why I don't like stiff is because, again, I told you I'm here in Kansas. And so 90% of what I'm hunting is flat ground, crop ground. So I'm like, well, if I get a stiff pair of boots, it's not going to be comfortable. But then they're stiff enough to where, if I head to Idaho on a spring bear hunt or Colorado for an elk hunt, then I'll survive. And so those are both the kind of boots I switch between right now. But yeah, I did. I saw Zamberlins the other day at I think I was in Colorado Springs at the Sportsman's Warehouse there, and I was impressed. They were comfortable. Now, run me through some tips, like your number one tip you give people when it comes to packs. Maybe your number one tip is, how to pack a pack or how to load a pack or fit a pack. But what's your number one tip when it comes to packs?
So for me, I spent a lot of years trying to find the right elk hunting pack, and there wasn't one. That was the conclusion I came to. So I would hunt in a day pack that I could carry my gear for the day, just a smaller 12 to 15 pounds with everything in it, including the pack. And then when I shot an elk, I'd bring out just a small load of meat in that pack, maybe the back straps or a front shoulder or something. And it was miserable. The pack was not made for carrying more than 15 or 20 pounds. And then I'd get back to the truck and I'd get my frame pack and go back in and, the bigger freighter pack that's made for hauling a load. But it's certainly not something you're going to hike around and hunt in. They're rigid. They usually don't have a bag on them. And so forever, that was kind of my system. And I always said, I need a pack that'll just do it all. One that's light enough, that can be compacted down and day hunt in it, so you don't feel like you're carrying a bulky pack, but then one that you can throw a hind quarter or a half an elk on and pack out and be somewhat comfortable. And, probably 8 or 10 years ago, a couple companies started trying going down that route, and they were still 8 or 10 pound packs. They still weren't comfortable with 100 pounds on them. The shoulder straps weren't good. They just weren't made to do both things. And then here about 5 or 6 years ago, the tides kind of turned, and there's 4 or 5 companies now making what I call a crossover pack. And that's something that's probably going to be 1,800 to 2,800 cubic inches. It's going to compact down super small. It's going to weigh 4 to 5 pounds. You can day hunt in it, with just 12 or 15 pounds of gear. And then when you kill an elk, you're literally able to throw 120 or 140 pounds, half of an elk on it. And the weak link is no longer the pack. The weak link is now me. And so that's kind of where I've ended up. And I think really for elk hunting is the most efficient system is finding a crossover pack that allows you to go fast and light, but then turns around, in the same step and throws half an elk on it and allows you to pack it out.
Now, I'll tell you, that is one thing. So I recently came in contact with Initial Ascent. Have you seen those guys?
I have. Yep.
I recently came in contact with those guys. And what I really like about them is the frames are all the same, and then you can change out the bag. So what I found super interesting and useful was, to go in, like you're talking, you can put the well, let me just get the names up, but I think it's like the 2000. You can put on the smaller bag and have it for a day pack. But then once you harvest an animal, you can go out and you don't have to change frames and everything. But you can simply, just switch bags that's on your frame. So you can go with like the IA2K for just your day pack while you're out hunting. But then, once you harvest an animal, you can come back and just put a meat loader on that pack or on that frame, or you can put, the IA6K bag on that frame. And so I thought that to be really cool. And a way to not have to buy, different packs, different kits, but rather just different bags for the same frame. And so I thought that to be really interesting. What pack do you run?
I use the EXO, so EXO Mountain Gear, and very similar. They have a super lightweight titanium frame, and then you can interchange different bag sizes. But the cool design on theirs, the thing I really like is the meat actually goes between the bag and the frame. So the bag unattaches from the frame, and you can slide 2 quarters between the frame and the bag. So you can still have all your day hunting gear in the bag, protected from the blood and everything, and without having to switch anything out. You just put those quarters in there. They have a little crib, super lightweight crib that holds the quarters up from sliding out between the two, and then strap it down and go.
Yeah, Steve Speck over there.
Yep.
That's actually, so one of the guys that works for him was the guy I told the story about running up the mountain and I was sucking wind.
Oh, really?
And so I remember coming back to like the S&S store there and Steve saying, "Well, how'd your hunt go, boys?" And I'm like, "Well, for him it was fine, but for me, like the first 10 minutes in, I couldn't breathe." And so yeah, I was actually one of the guys that works there for him at S&S that blew up the mountain, and I was left in the dust sucking wind. But I'll tell you though, that's where I learned. That was the lesson that I took away from that hunt. Said, man, this guy's got a good quality pair of boots on and his feet don't hurt. And this guy has a good quality pack and he can move faster. His back doesn't hurt. He doesn't have to spend 10 minutes every 3 hours adjusting his pack and trying to get it to hold better and fit better. And so I walked away from that hunt thinking, as soon as I get home, I'm getting good boots and I'm getting a good pack.
Yep. No, very important. And, and I think it's something that gets overlooked, but you have your backpack on your back every waking hour of the day when you're elk hunting. You're hiking and it's usually got some sort of a load. I try to keep mine around 16 to 20 pounds for a day pack, and that includes my food, my water, a rain jacket, all the tools that I need for when we're, successful. Our kill kit has everything I need to hunt. Everything's in there. So you're carrying, 20 pounds, and that's probably on the lighter end of what most people are going to carry, but you're doing it all day. And if you don't have a comfortable pack, man, your shoulders and your hip flexors and everything after 2 or 3 days are going to say, hey, let's take a day or two off here. And the difference in when you have a comfortable pack is you're able to keep going day after day. And then, when you're successful, that's a chore. You're hauling heavy loads out of the woods. And if there's 2 or 3 of us with tags, we haul one out and the next morning we're up and hunting again. And we might shoot another one that day and have to pack it out. So a pack is definitely, it's worth finding something that you've proven that is going to be comfortable and that's going to allow you to hunt the way that you want to hunt.
Yeah, no, those are the 3 things. There's a lot of things that you can skimp out on and find cheaper and cut corners on. But I learned very, very quickly, boots, pack, and base layers. If those 3 things are good, you'll be fine. If those 3 things are high quality and function well, then you'll be comfortable, you'll get by, and the hunt will be good. But if you try to skip out on those things, you'll be miserable. Your back will hurt, your feet will hurt, and get hot spots and blisters. So I always encourage people to not skimp out on boots, packs, or base layers. Now, what is your number one tip for, and maybe you can answer this, for people who don't live in the mountains? What's your number one tip for practicing shooting elevation, up and down?
Man, it's probably something I take for granted because we do live, our house is on a steep hill, so I could literally go out on my deck and get a steep angle shooting right off of it down the hill. I think number one, your third axis on your sight is super important when you start shooting a little bit of distance, and especially on steep ground, making sure that your bow's staying level is important. As far as practicing, I've seen people get on their roof of their house and just shoot 20 yards or 30 yards down. Any kind of an elevation is going to simulate that. I think what's more important is just shooting and shooting and shooting so that muscle memory is there, so that when you draw back, because when an elk's standing in front of you bugling at 20 yards, I've seen people literally shoot over the top of an elk at 12 yards. And you're sitting there going, there's a vital on that thing that's 18 inches by, 14 inches or something. All you have to do is point at 10 or 12 yards. And I've watched people draw back. Their bowstring is 3 inches away from their nose, out on the side of their face. They aren't even looking through their sight pins. They're just looking at the elk. They just draw back and go through the motion of shooting. And so just repetitive shooting over and over and over. So you have that muscle memory. So your anchor point, you come back to the exact right place. Your nose is on the string. You're looking through the peep and looking through the sight housing. All of that's so important. And then the follow through on the shot, the squeezing, the release, all of those things, when that becomes automatic and natural, it just takes so many of the other elements out of what could cause you to miss or even worse, wound the animal. So I think that's probably the most important part of it, because, man, you talk about buck fever. If there is nothing I've found that will induce a shot of adrenaline like having an elk standing in front of you bugling when you're at full draw. So, the elevation, the up and down shooting, I think that, you can compensate for that. Rangefinders will tell you what to shoot the distance for, all of those things, but there's nothing that's going to help you overcome that fever when an elk standing in front of you screaming.
Yeah, so what I recently did, and this is how I came up with an idea of how to practice elevation. Just recently got a new deck built at our house, and the contractor showed up, and day one, my wife was telling him, I want it to be this color, and I want the hand railing to be this color, and whatever, and the stairs to go this way, and all that good stuff. And I stopped him. I said, listen, she can tell you whatever she wants to tell you. All I want is in one corner of the deck for there to be a platform built up. My deck was already 6 foot high, so I'm like, if you could go up another 6 foot, then I can at least practice, and my backyard slopes pretty good. And so I thought, well, if I'm already 6 foot and you can get me a 6 foot platform, I'll be shooting 12 foot, and I'll be shooting even into my downhill backyard. And so that's what I did. And my wife's like, are you kidding me? You're building this on our deck and blah, blah. And I'm like, well, sorry. But that's how I did it. And listen, I understand if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm not going to go build a new deck just so I can get a shooting platform. You don't have to. If you have an existing deck, put a chair up there, put a table or a stool or a step ladder or whatever. But just find some way to get up there a bit and practice shooting down, shooting up. Just find some way to do it. I also, before that was built, I used to go to our local dam, which I'm sure the fine men at the Wellington Police Department would not approve of this. But I used to go to our city dam, and I would put a target, halfway up the dam, and I would shoot up at it, and then I would go halfway up the dam and shoot down at it, and that's what I would do in the mornings, early in the mornings. That way, cops weren't there. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I did do it early in the mornings, mainly because that's where I hike, is at the dam, because that's the only place I can get elevation. But that's what I would do. So be creative, find a way to practice, find a way to do things, but also I just want to emphasize what Corey said. Have yourself a good shot process and work through that shot process every time. Whether it's for the recurve or a compound, have yourself mental triggers. My mental trigger with my recurve, and I put out a video not too long ago on Bear Archery's YouTube of this, is grip. And I think about my hand on the grip of the bow, and then I think hook, and I put my hook on the string, my grip on the string. I draw back, I come to anchor, and that's the next, verbal cue in my mind. And then back, and I kind of rotate my shoulder back into my back, and then spot, and I pick a spot on the target, and then pull, and then it releases. And if I'm working my mind through that every shot, and not skipping out on steps and just rushing through a shot, but if I work that every time, then even when I'm in different situations and I continue to work through that, you'll be a lot more successful. So find yourself a good shot process, have mental cues that you can work through. And then when you get into different situations, shooting up, shooting down, if you're so used to running through that in your mind, then you'll still work through your shot process and execute a good shot. Before we go, what is your number one, Fred Bear was big on his field notes. So what's your number one field note concerning elk hunting that you've taken over the years and, put in your back pocket and made yourself a better hunter with?
I'll mention two, because the first one I'm going to mention hopefully is obvious, but I think it's something that does get overlooked and maybe isn't recognized for how important it should be, and that's the wind. An elk lives and dies by its nose, and every movement they make is based around the wind. And in the West, in the mountains, we have thermals, and I know a lot of Midwestern and Eastern hunters aren't necessarily familiar with the concept of thermals or how they work in the mountains. And so just understanding that, in the morning, your thermals are typically coming down the mountain, middle of the day, they're going up, and just planning your approach as you go in to move in on an elk, you've got to recognize what the thermals are doing more so than the wind. We don't necessarily always have like a prevailing wind out of the west or something. It's more of a mountain thermal. So understanding how that works is going to be critical. I think when it comes to archery hunting, you're primarily hunting the rut, and that lends itself to calling, which is my favorite part of elk hunting. And so many people get caught up in the calling strategies or tactics, and they get confused or overwhelmed. And the way I break it down is really simple. It keeps it simple. There's only a couple calls and sounds you need to be able to make to efficiently call in elk, and understanding that you don't have to understand an entire language, because there's some that some people that teach the full elk language, and it's almost like trying to learn a foreign language. Just, what did the elk just say? What do I need to say back? And understanding all of that. And I break it down to an elk is going to respond based on their emotion more so than on a language that you speak. And so understanding what emotion you need to trigger in the elk to elicit the response and the reaction that you want to get out of it is going to be critical. And that is, a bull elk in September is going to respond to his desire to breed or his desire to fight. So all you really need to do when you're calling an elk is either convince him that you're a cow that's ready to be bred, or that you're a bull that wants to fight, and you've got to convince him to fight. And so learning to put that emotion to solicit those responses, or to elicit those responses from the elk, is probably the number one thing that I would say. If you're going elk hunting and you want to call in an elk, and you want to have the most confidence going into that, simplify it and use that approach.
So you've either got to sweet talk them, or you've got to trash talk them.
Yep, that's it exactly. Yeah, and you look at, and I relate it to humans. And when you're a college guy, ramped up full of testosterone, if there's somebody 400 yards away from you and you kind of mumble under your breath in a non-threatening way, man, I really don't like that guy, nothing's probably going to happen. But you walk around the corner and you bump noses with a guy and you start screaming and belittling him in front of his girlfriend right there and telling him what a loser he is, and, really trash talking him, there's probably going to be some fists thrown there. And elk are the same way. If you're 400 yards away and you're just giving them a very stale sounding bugle, they're going to be like, yeah, whatever. But you get in close into their zone, 100 or 150 yards from them, and you insult them and you threaten them and you challenge them. There's very few elk that aren't going to come running in looking for that fight. And, it's just that emotion that you put into it. You have to scream at him. You have to let him know, I am mad and I want to do something about this. I want to settle this. And one of the other things that I always, make sure people understand is important is you never want to throw out that first bugle as a challenge. So you don't want to be 120 yards away and scream this challenge at a bull. I always start with a cow call, get the bull to answer the cow call. And when he answers cow call, he's basically saying to the cow, hey, I'm a bull, you're a cow. It's that time of year. Why don't you come hang out with me? And then that's when I hit him with the challenge. So he's sweet talking this cow all of a sudden and doesn't realize I'm there. I challenge him, I insult him. And just that combination of me extending the challenge to him, close into him, it flips a switch there and trips a trigger that it's a lot of fun. And a lot of times it happens fast from there. Those elk come in with fire in their eyes and slobbering out of their mouth and their nose, and they're looking for a fight.
Yeah. Now, I do have one more question for you. But before that, let me give a quick thank you to my friends over at Bonning. Bonning makes all of your arrow building tools, but also all of your components to build your arrows. So whether you need wraps or fletchings, whatever you need, they've got it. So go check out Bonning. They also have some really cool Fredbear branded wraps. I just the other day fletched up some arrows with the Fredbear flannel, and I threw some red and silver fletchings on them. And they look awesome. They look incredible. So go check out Bonning Archery for all of your arrow building tools and all of your arrow building components. Now, I did just get a question sent in just in the nick of time. What all do you carry in your binocular harness?
So I, until about a year ago, didn't use a binocular harness. I just used the straps on the binoculars. That's all I had. But I did convert over and have found benefit in it. But if I'm shed hunting in the spring, I'll have my bino harness, the main harness in the center, and then a pouch on each side. And on one side, I carry a radio, a two-way radio. On the other side, I carry my snacks. When I'm archery hunting, I take one off just so that it's not, I just feel like it's less potential interference with the string. But I carry my binoculars in the center part, and then I carry snacks in the other part. I carry my rangefinder in a waist belt, in a hip pocket on the waist belt on the right-hand side.
I like your answer of snacks. That's the best answer.
Yeah.
I think of it like this.
Gotta have food. Yeah.
When I think of my binocular harness, and I do run maybe a bigger binocular harness, more space, more pockets. I run an Alaska Guide Creations harness, and when I think of my harness, what I think of is if I drop my pack here to make a stock, do I have everything in this harness that I need? And not need to survive a month, not need to even stay the night, but an extra little hat clip for your, or a light clip for your hat, a little knife at least, just enough to where if anything happens, I can survive. Maybe it's I always got chapstick, man. I'm a chapstick fiend. But then I always think back to like, okay, I want a little bitty knife at least. Usually it's like a lightweight, your backcountry style knives, whatever brand it might be. My rangefinder, a lighter probably. But yeah, I just think of that as if I drop my pack here to make a stock or whatever it might be, do I have everything here to at least get by? And that's kind of how I think of my binocular harness. It's not necessarily what I want to get to quick, but more so if things go south, can I get by with just this? And that's kind of how I think of it. I know some guys are different. And of course, if I'm in the whitetail woods, that's completely different. I might have some face paint and snacks and and my cell phone or whatever. But if I'm on a Western style hunt, that's the way I look at that. Is if I drop my pack here, do I have everything on my chest I need? So before we go, where can they find you on Instagram?
Just Corey Jacobsen .elk101 is my personal Instagram, and then elk101 on Instagram is our business page. And that's, Elk 101. We're pretty active there. I'm kind of hit and miss on my personal one, but share a lot more outside of elk hunting, because we do, we chase just about everything out here in the West. And so share some of that on my personal page.
Are you on Facebook?
Yes, but not as active. So Elk 101 is on Facebook, just Elk 101. And I usually just share my Instagram posts over to my personal Facebook, which is Corey Jacobsen Elk Hunter.
Awesome. Go follow him. Go check out elk101.com if you have not, because it is a awesome place to gather information and to learn and grow as an elk hunter. Corey, thank you so much for coming on, man. Thank you so much for what you do and helping to teach and inspire and train up a new generation of hunters. From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it, because I'm one of those guys that get to grow and learn from it.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for that. And thanks for inviting me to come on the podcast and share some of my passion for elk.
And guys, go get entered into that giveaway. If you want to go elk hunting with Corey Jacobsen, this is your shot. Go get entered to win it. Go buy you some product. Go buy you an informational course. Both things will help you in the long run anyhow. So you're only going to better yourself, and you'll win a chance to go elk hunting with Corey Jacobsen in the meantime. So, guys, thanks for listening. You guys have a great week.